My name is Timothy Ateek. I'm one of the people who works here at the Ridge. It's a privilege to get to be here with you guys this morning. I want to start out telling a story. About a week ago, my wife and I, we went to Colorado just on a little vacation. We wanted to get a little skiing in before the end of the season. So we went with some friends from this church, and so we flew up to Colorado, and we just had an incredible time. We got to connect with friends, we got to laugh, we got to eat good food, we got to ski, we got to connect with God. It was this incredible trip. But our flight from Denver to Austin on the way back, there's no other word that describes it besides just crazy. I mean, it was chaotic. And here's why. We got on the plane to fly back from Denver. I was sitting towards the back of the plane, and at some point during the flight, one of the people in our group, his name was Mark, he ends up walking down the aisle, and he's about to pass me, and I start talking to him, asking him what's going on, and he said, man, I'm changing seats, okay? This guy's sitting next to me, man, he's just freaking out. I'm afraid he's going to, punch me or something. Because apparently he was sitting next to this guy and trying to watch his movie, and this guy was just just staring at him while he was watching his movie. It's just this weird deal. And so he was finding a new seat, and then a little bit later in the flight attendant comes on the loudspeaker and says, are there any doctors or nurses on the flight? Because apparently this same gentleman needed medical attention. And it always works out, but there was a doctor on the plane, and then there was probably about 3 different nurses that kind of hopped up. One of the women in our group was a nurse, and so she got up to start assisting. You know, when a situation like that happens, everyone on the plane, they just want to see what is going on. And so, we're all just like, what's going on? Like that. It's kind of that phenomenon when there's a traffic on the interstate, or there's a wreck on the interstate. The reason there's traffic is not because of the wreck, it's because everyone wants to see the wreck, okay? And so everyone's just trying to see kind of what's going on, and I'm towards the back, and so all I can see is kind of the heads, the head of the doctor, the heads of the nurses, and then in just a moment's time, everything escalated real quickly. Like one of the nurses, she got up on the seat and she began to administer CPR to this man. And it was one of the most intense situations I've been in a long time, because this nurse just began to do these chest compressions on this man, and this dead silent plane, all we could hear was her counting out the compressions. It's just this incredibly intense situation. Come to find out, this man was traveling alone. He was diabetic. There was no way for the doctor and the nurses to know that, and his blood sugar just tanked. I mean, it just crashed. And he was just in this downward spiral to the point where, the doctors, nurses, they couldn't find a pulse, and so they administered CPR. They were able to revive him. They were able to get him some sugar. He was able to walk off the plane with the help of the paramedics. But it was just this it was the weirdest way to end vacation, okay? There's no other way to say it. And as I was thinking about this sermon for this week, I started thinking, there's a lot of similarities between the trip that I took to the mountains of Colorado. There's a lot of similarities with the trip that we're going to see Moses take up to this mountain in the wilderness of Sinai. He's going to go to this mountain called Mount Sinai, and there's similarities because he goes to this mountain to connect with God. That's kind of what we did. He goes to connect with God. He has this incredible time, but on his way back down from the mountain, Moses is going to witness something going seriously wrong. He's going to see some people who aren't crashing physically, but he's going to witness them crashing spiritually. He's going to see this group of people called the Israelites who are just in this downward spiral of sin. In the same way that plane flight was one of the most intense situations I've been in a while, I want you to know that this text we're looking at today is extremely intense. It's a very serious text, very intense writing from God to us, but I want you to know some people in here need to come to the realization that you might not be in immediate need of medical attention, but your soul is screaming out because it is in desperate need of spiritual attention. right now because something is going wrong inside of you, okay? If you are visiting this week, just want you to know we are so glad you're here. Just to catch you up on what we've been doing, we've been walking through the life of Moses all semester. If you don't know who Moses is basically a God-appointed man who's been given the mission and the task to take 2 million Israelites who are slaves in the land of Egypt, and he is to rescue them out of Egypt and take them to the land of Canaan where they will be free. And so where we kind of left off last week is that Moses has, through God's power, has busted the Israelites out of Egypt, and now they have gone into the wilderness of Sinai, and they have kind of set up camp, base camp, at the foot of this mountain called Mount Sinai. And this mountain is very important because God's presence actually descends upon this mountain. It says that there is this thick, visible cloud that kind of rests on Mount Sinai as a sign that God's presence is there. But God puts a rule in place, and his rule is this: Israelites are not allowed to ascend. They're not allowed to ascend Mount Sinai to meet with God. So there's actually a boundary that is put in place. The Israelites know we are not allowed to ascend the mountain to meet with God. Moses, on the other hand, is allowed to because Moses is the mediator between God and the Israelites. So Moses is the only one who has permission. And what will happen is that God will summon Moses and he will say, "Come up to the mountain to meet with me." So Moses will go up the mountain. He will get a message from God, and then he will go back down the mountain and he will give this message to the Israelites. So today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of look at one of Moses' mountain expeditions. We're going to look at what happens when Moses kind of goes up the mountain to meet with God, and then on his way back down, what he observes. I want us to just kind of get some of the backstory. So if you have a Bible, open up to Exodus chapter 24. We're going to be in Exodus 32, the bulk of our time today, but let's start out in 24 just to get the background. Exodus 24, I want to read you verses 12 through 18. This is kind of the setup. It's a good chunk of text to read at one time, but it's very important, so clue into it. Here's what it says, verse 12. It said, "The Lord said to Moses, 'Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, that I may give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandment, which I have written for their instruction.' So Moses rose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up into the mountain of God, and he said to the elders, 'Wait here for us until we return to you, and behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a dispute, let him go to them.' Then Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the 7th day he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud." Listen to this. "Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the sight of the people of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So here we go. Moses is summoned by God. God says, "Come up to the mountain to meet with me. I want to give you these commandments. I'm going to give you these 2 tablets. And on these tablets, I'm going to inscribe my laws, my commandments for the people." So Moses kind of gets his affairs together, and he puts people in charge. He puts his older brother Aaron in charge of the Israelites. Then he takes his understudy Joshua, and they head up the mountain. And the scripture is very clear. The view from base camp for the Israelites was that the presence of God on the mountain looked like a devouring fire. It's incredible. Imagine that. Imagine looking at a mountain and just saying, well, there's no way to describe that besides, well, it looks like a devouring fire. That's pretty much amazing. So that's kind of the view that they had from base camp. And the text is very clear that Moses was there 40 days and 40 nights. So here's what you need to know. That's Exodus chapter 24. Chapters 24 through 31 kind of chronicle the instructions that God gives Moses on the mountain. And God's going to kind of give Moses the instructions for how the Israelites can build this temple or this house of worship so that they can effectively worship God. But we're going to pick it up in chapter 32, which is going to kind of cut to base camp. And it's going to clue us into what's going on with the Israelites while Moses is gone for 40 days and 40 nights. So flip over to Exodus 32. That's where we'll be the rest of the day, or, well, maybe the day. We'll see. Maybe just our time here. See how the Spirit moves. Okay, Exodus 32. Let me read this to you. This is very interesting. Verse 1. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So get this, Moses, who is the Israelites' leader, is gone for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses is the mediator. He's the one who goes up to the mountain to get the message from God and bring it back. The Israelites start freaking out. They're like, we don't have a leader. What happened to this guy? We haven't seen him. He hasn't showed up. 40 days is a long period of time. We don't know what's happened to him. And so a combination of impatience and the possibility that God might have just zapped Moses while he was in this area of consuming fire, the Israelites start plotting and scheming, and they say, you know what? God's not kind of coming through for us. And so what they do is it says that they gather themselves together to Aaron. They go to the number 2 guy in charge, and the text indicates when they gather themselves around, it's this idea that they crowd around him. They're not coming to Aaron to ask him what they should do. They're coming to him to tell him what he must do. This is like peer pressure 101. Okay, school principals and counselors stay busy because of situations like this. All right, this is like a middle school guy's locker room gone way bad. Okay, so this group of people gather around Aaron, and their demand is, "Up, make us gods who will go before us." Here's what I want you to think about. You know movies that kind of start out with kind of a chaotic, intense scene, and then at some point in the chaotic scene, it just kind of freezes. It freezes and then it fades to black, and it says something like 2 weeks earlier. It doesn't have the voice, but it says 2 weeks earlier. And then it kind of snaps to a whole nother scene that kind of gives you the background to this chaotic scene that you just saw. You know what I'm talking about, those kind of movies? Imagine that that's what's happening here. There's this really intense scene where hundreds of thousands of people gather around this one dude, and they're like, "Get up, make us gods who will go before us." Freeze. Fade to black. 2 months earlier. Here's the backdrop to Exodus 32. Very important. Right before Moses goes up the mountain to be with God for 40 days and 40 nights, the Israelites and Moses have this extremely special and spiritual ceremony where Moses basically gives this talk from God. And it's this message about how the Israelites can honor God with their lives. And in that message, Moses' first thing that he comes out with in his message from God is the 10 Commandments. So the 10 Commandments are given just about 2 months before this. Pop quiz for all of the regular church attenders, visitors, you're off the hook. What's the first of the 10 Commandments? If I just mumble, maybe it'll sound like I'm saying that. You're right. I'm surprised someone wasn't just like, Jesus, that would have not worked. But the first commandment is this: you shall have no other gods before me. So that is said in this message from God through Moses to the Israelites. And there's this really special scene where the Israelites make this covenant with God. They cry out in unison. You can read this in Exodus 24. They cry out in unison, "All that the Lord has commanded, we will do. We will be obedient." And then it gets real weird because Moses kills an animal and then he flings blood all over the people. I'm going to do that right now. How cool would that be if I was just like, but he flings blood all over everyone, and everyone's just passionate about God, and they're just like, everything he has commanded, we will do. There's something wrong here. Because at one moment, the people cry out in unison, "We will be obedient." And then what they just did in Exodus 32 is that they blatantly disobeyed the first commandment that God had given them when they say, "Up, make us gods to go before us." They cry out in unison. There's some disconnect here. Obviously, the day that they got showered by blood wasn't a memorable experience because they just broke the first commandment. Now, Aaron, in probably his greatest leadership of all times, look at how he responds. Look at verse 2. Here's what Aaron does with their demand. Verse 2 of chapter 32 says, "So Aaron said to them, 'Take off the rings of gold that are in the ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me.' So all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. And they said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt.'" So this is crazy. Aaron takes their demand and he says, "Okay, everyone, it'd be like me saying, okay, the ushers are going to come down. Guys, take your wives' rings, earrings off, pass them to the plate." And then I was just melt all of it. And so Aaron says, "Okay, pass in your rings, all your earrings, pass it in." The interesting thing is that this gold that the Israelites have, where did they get it from? Egypt. This was plunder that God had blessed them with when they were right before the Exodus, right before they left Egypt. God allowed the Israelites to have favor with their masters. People just went to their master as slaves and was like, "Hey, can I have your earring?" "Sure," and give them to, "How about that ring too? Rolex? I'm more of a tag guy, but I'll take it." They get all of this gold that is given to them as a blessing from God, just as plunder. And commentators say the reason that God allowed them to get all this plunder was so that when Moses comes down from the mount with all the instructions as to how to build a temple of worship to God, they would have adequate resources to make this temple just a magnificent offering to the Lord. I mean, this jewelry was a constant reminder of God's graciousness and his provision for them. And in a moment's time, they take God's provision, throw it in a pile. Aaron takes it and fashions it into a golden calf. Why a calf? Why did Aaron make a bull? Because that's what they had seen in Egypt. Back in Egypt, there were plenty of divine bovines. There was plenty of people worshiping animals, specifically cows or bulls. I don't know if you've picked up on it yet, but the Israelites have this horrible habit of always going back to Egypt in their heart and their minds when it doesn't seem like God's coming through for them. You know what I'm talking about? They come out of Egypt, they get hungry. What's the first thing they say? "We miss Egypt. In Egypt, we had meat and bread and we'd be full." You guys were slaves. You remember that? "We're hungry." The very next chapter, "Oh, we're thirsty. Moses, why did you do this to us? Why do you hate us? Why didn't you just leave us in Egypt?" And now Moses has been gone 40 days and they start to question, "Where's our leader? Where's our God? He's not coming through for us." So what do? In their minds and their hearts, they retreat to Pharaoh's gods. And they begin to worship the gods that they had seen in Egypt. One commentator said this, I loved it, it's a great quote. He said, "It proved to be more difficult to get Egypt out of the Israelites than it was to get the Israelites out of Egypt." It's so true. Acts 7:39 puts it this way: "Our fathers," talking about the Israelites, "refused to obey him," that's God, "but thrust him aside, and in their hearts they turned to Egypt." Now I want to make two comments. Number one, I think that the Israelites are morons. And number two, I think we're just like them. When I was preparing for this talk, It was Thursday, and if you're ever preparing a message and it's Thursday and you don't know where you're going, that's a bad place to be, all right? So I was sitting at Starbucks. I got my frothy beverage there, hoping that would spark some insight, and it's just not coming. And I end up getting on the phone with a friend. I think he just happened to call me, and we were talking, and towards the end of the talk, I just threw in there, kind of at the end of the conversation, I was like, hey, dude, pray for me. I'm speaking in big church, whatever this place is called. I guess y'all are big people. And so I'm speaking in big church. Please pray for me. It's just not really coming. And he was like, well, what are you talking on? I was like, the golden calf in Exodus. He said, I'm going to make this real easy on you. And then he proceeded to say this. He was like, TA, I spend all day trying to fulfill myself with things that are not the true fulfillment. He said, if I make a business deal, I feel awesome. I'm going to get paid. I'm going to get a lot of money. My boss is going to love me. I'm going to get national recognition over my coworkers. He said, you know what, if a client falls through or my wife kind of wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, I can run to pornography because it will fulfill me instantly. He said, TA, today has been a bad day. And something in me just wants to go call one of my extended family members and just brag to them about the glory of my elementary-aged son, his athletic performance. I want to go find fulfillment in just what my kid has done. He said, TA, the golden calf is the closet issue of the modern church. I was like, hey, dude, thanks for writing my talk. He was like, no, you have the gift, I have the problem. I was like, you're right. Bye. No, I was like, the interesting thing was that we all have the problem. I mean, this friend was spot on, but the real truth is that we all have the problem. Because every single one of us has a golden calf. Every single one of us, when we feel like God's not coming through how we think He should, every single one of us turns to something in this world to seek fulfillment. And we make something in this world out to be God when there's only one true God. What's your golden calf? What do you look to in this world to come through for you? What do you look to in this world to fulfill you in a way that only Jesus Christ can? Is it something that my friend mentioned? Is it your kids? Are your kids your golden calf? If your kid goes to the right school, your kid goes to the right school, your kid is on the right team, is that your golden calf? Is your golden calf the fact that you've gotten enough plastic surgery or you've spent enough on clothes so that you look a lot younger than your aging friends? Is your golden calf having everyone around you think that you are significant? If you're single in here, is it having a girlfriend or boyfriend? We all have golden calves. What is yours? The thing you need to understand is that whatever your golden calf is, it will fail you. No matter who you are and what your calf is, it's only a matter of time. Your golden calf will not come through for you. It will fail you. And the irony is that you're trying to seek satisfaction in something that will always leave you wanting, needing, grasping for just a little bit more. We all need to understand that being a child of God has to be enough for us. Yeah, TA, I know I'm a child of God. I understand that. No, that has to be enough for you. If at the end of the day, the only thing true of you is that you're a child of God, that's enough. Because the reality is, the truth that you're a child of God is the only thing that you can count on being constant in a world that can crash down on you in a moment's time. So what is your golden calf? Look back at the text. Look at verse 5. That was the Israelites' sin, breaking the first commandment. Now we're going to see Aaron break the second commandment. Look at what it says. Verse 5, it says, the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there I'm sorry, I'm in chapter 34. My fault. Okay, chapter 32. We're back. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not prepared to talk on that. Verse 5. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." And when he says the Lord there, he's talking about Yahweh. I think right here, Aaron's just trying to salvage his leadership. Because the Israelites come to him and they say, "Make us gods." And I think that in this situation, Aaron's just like, okay, I got to redeem this whole deal. Okay, here's what I'll do. They're asking for several gods. I'm just going to make one cow, and then I make this proclamation that we're going to have a feast. This golden calf, this is actually Yahweh. This is the God you've been tracking with all along. So kind of crisis diverted. The problem is that he just broke the second commandment. What's the second commandment? The exact wording is, "You shall make for yourself, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above." He just broke the second commandment. He's just as guilty as the Israelites that he's in charge of right now. So look at how the Israelites respond to Aaron's proclamation. Look at verse 6. It says, "And they rose up early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." That word "to play" there, it suggests illicit, immoral sexual activity. So the way that the people respond and honor the Lord is that they eat, drink, and plunge in their immorality. And part of me just wonders, I wonder if at the exact same moment in time, the Israelites have two contrasting images of Yahweh. Because right in front of them is the golden calf, but I just wonder if they could look in front of them and see the golden calf, but if they were to just glance up, I wonder if they would still see the presence of God on the mountain that looks like a consuming fire. Because God is a consuming fire. The God of the mountain declares that he is a God who is mighty and powerful and holy and worthy to be worshiped and worthy to be obeyed. It's a God who has laws and commands that are to be obeyed, and he demands obedience, and we should respond in obedience. But then Yahweh, the golden calf, is an image of God, or it portrays God as lifeless and powerless, unholy, a God who has no laws or commandments, doesn't deserve any obedience, and it's a God who never intrudes on wickedness or immorality. And I just wonder, all eyes on me, I don't think anyone in here is guilty of building an actual golden calf in their backyard. If so, call me. I want to see it. But can't we all agree that we are all guilty of building an image of God in our mind that isn't really God at all? I wonder if anyone in here is kind of serving a God that's kind of a hybrid between the God of the mountain and the golden calf. Isn't that kind of what we want? We'd never admit it, but that's kind of what we want. I mean, when times are tough, we want the God on the mountain. Like when someone's physically ill, or we need a job, or we need more money, or we're kind of in a bind, we want the God of the mountain who's going to show up and be mighty and powerful and come through for us. But then we also want a God who's not going to intrude. Because when we want to do with our money what we want, or when infidelity seems a lot more appealing than fidelity, or when marriage ceases to be beneficial for me, or when the instant gratification of pornography looks a lot more appealing than the delayed satisfaction of wooing your wife, we don't want a God who's going to step in and demand obedience to some law. We want a God who's non-intrusive. We want a God with no laws or commands except you deserve to be happy and follow your heart. Let me just tell you, there's only one true God, and it's the God of the mountain. That is a consuming fire. The God of the Bible is holy and righteous and blameless. He is just, he is wrathful, and at the same time, he is loving and merciful. He's all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present, and he has authority, and he is sovereign over all things. And he has laws and commandments, and he demands obedience from us for our joy. God gives us laws and commands to give us life, to lead us to life, never to steal life from us. Do you believe that? Let's move on quickly. I'm going to summarize for you verses 7 through 18. I honestly could have a 4-week series just on Exodus 32. We don't have that luxury. Let me just summarize for you what's going on in verses 7 through 18. The text is going to kind of snap back to up on the mountain, what's going on between God and Moses. God basically clues Moses in on what's happening down at base camp. He says, Moses, the people built a golden calf. They're worshiping different gods. Now, Moses, leave me alone so I can just basically unleash anger on them, wipe out the Israelites, and start over. And Moses, who is a beautiful picture of Jesus in the Old Testament, he stands in the gap and he intercedes for the people. And he says, please forgive them of their sins. Please relent. And God relents. So Moses takes these two tablets and makes his way down the mountain. And we pick it up in verse 19. Look at what it says happens. It says in verse 19, and as soon as he came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses' anger burned hot, and he threw the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made and burned it with fire and ground it to powder and scattered it on the water and made the people of Israel drink it. Okay, so imagine this. Moses comes down the mountain. He's carrying these tablets. He sees the idolatry going on. And in a moment of righteous anger, he takes the tablets and throws them to the ground as a symbolic display to the Israelites. That covenant where I threw blood on you and you said, I will obey, you have broken it. It has been broken. And then he takes the golden calf, he burns it, then he grounds it into powder and makes them drink it. Can we all agree? Moses is not the right bartender, all right? He's not to make you a cocktail. But guys, can't we agree? He is one bad dude for an 80-year-old, right? I can just imagine him being like, you want to worship it? Well, then you can drink it. You know, it'd just be like, oh, that guy, I want to be him when I'm old. It's awesome. But do you see the extreme lengths that Moses went to rid the camp completely of the false god that the people have made? I mean, he was intentional. He was strategic. He took specific steps to get the false god completely out of the camp. Let me just ask you, what do you need to do today to be extreme with your golden calf? What intentionality do you need to have? What specific steps do you need to take to remove your golden calf from your life? A guy named Philip Ryken said this. He said, all too often Christians try to deal with their idolatries by putting them in the closet rather than taking them out with the trash. We pretend that we have cleaned house, spiritually speaking, but in fact, sin is still lurking in the cupboard, ready to come out the next time we are tempted to open the door. What do you need to do today to be done with your golden calf? Let's move on. Verse 21. This is humorous and sad all at once. It says, and Moses said to Aaron, what did this people do to you that you have brought such a great sin upon them? And Aaron said, let not the anger of my Lord burn hot. You know the people, that they are set on evil. For they said to me, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. So I said to them, let any who have gold take it off. So they gave it to me, and I threw it into the fire, and out came a calf. Moses, they asked for a god. All I did was I gathered the jewelry and threw it into the fire, and you would never believe what happened. A calf came out. If I were Moses, I think I'd be like, really? Final answer. That's the story you want to go with. That's ridiculous, all right? That's absurd. Do you ever make excuses for your golden calf? Have you ever explained away your golden calf or blamed it on someone or something? Don't we do that? Guys, have you ever thought, you know what, my marriage is miserable because all my wife and I do, all we do is fight. And I know I shouldn't lust after other women or look at pornography, but because we fight, my wife never wants to be intimate with me, and I have needs, and so this is just what I need to do. You're just making excuses. Have you ever had this thought, you know what, this 80 plus hours a week that I need to work it. And I'm not going to be home as much, and my family is just going to have to understand I'm not going to be around very much for the next few years, but it's so that we can have a bunch of money, and ultimately we'll be secure in the future, and then we can do whatever we want. We can play as much as we want. That's an excuse. Have you ever had the thought, you know what, this is just how people live in this area of town. This is how you drive here. This is how you act. This is what you buy. This is what you need if you're going to fit in. You don't want to stick out. I'm just trying to be a supportive parent. I just want my kid to be the best. I'm sorry. No, I just want what's best for my kid. You need to understand that as long as there is an abundance of excuses, there will always be a shortage of intimacy with the Lord. Why? Because your affection is directed at the wrong God. What would it look like for you today to just stop trying to save face? Stop trying to explain your golden calf away. What if you just went before the Lord and confessed your sin and asked Him to redirect your affection towards Him? Let's finish up. I encourage you, go back and read this passage on your own. There's good stuff in verses 25 through 29. I'm going to skip to 30. This is a powerful ending. It says in verse 30, the next day Moses said to the people, "You have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written." This is powerful. Moses goes back to the Lord and he says, "God, these people have sinned, but please forgive them. I am willing to give my life up for them if somehow it will atone for their sin." I mean, this is the climax of the story. This is William Wallace offering up his life for his countrymen. Any minute, Moses is about to scream out, "Freedom!" And God's going to be like, okay, I saw Braveheart too. Okay, they're forgiven. Any minute. This is the climax. This is what makes movies so good. And look at how God responds. Verse 33. But the Lord said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. But now go, lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them." Then the Lord sent a plague on the people because they made the calf, the one that Aaron made. God says, in the end, Moses, they all die. That's kind of an abrupt ending to the story. It looked like it was building beautifully, and then it just ends abruptly. I think Moses understood a powerful truth. He understood that where there is golden calves, there is sin. And where there is sin, there is wrath and judgment. Because sin has a penalty, and that penalty is death. What Moses didn't understand is that although he was an incredible mediator between God and the Israelites, there is only one person, there is only one mediator who is qualified to offer his life for the sins of a people so that they can experience forgiveness, and that one mediator is Jesus Christ. Hebrews 9:15 puts it this way, "Therefore he, Jesus Christ, he is the mediator of a new covenant so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal life, since a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions committed under the first covenant." I want to end by just saying, these Israelites' lives, they ended in an unfortunate way because of their sin, but our lives don't have to end in the same unfortunate way. I want to be clear, every single one of us has golden calves in our lives. Each one of us has turned to this world to find false gods, hoping that they can offer us satisfaction and fulfillment that honestly only Christ can offer us. Every single one of us has a penalty that must be paid because of our sin. That penalty is death. And Jesus Christ is our perfect mediator who has stepped in the gap in our behalf. He has absorbed the wrath of a holy God on behalf of an unholy people. But my question to you is, do you know Jesus Christ? Do you know Jesus Christ as your mediator? The one who has stood in the gap on your behalf. If you don't, just like that plane ride that I was on, this is a matter of life and death. I love you, that's why I tell you. I hope you know him. If you don't, I pray that today you would. Let's pray together. Lord, thank you for who you are. Jesus, I thank you that you are our perfect mediator. I pray that if anyone in here does not have a relationship with you, that they do not know you as the one who has stood in the gap to absorb the wrath of a holy God. I pray that today you would convict their hearts and that they would know you. God, reveal to us our golden calves. I pray that you would redirect our hearts to you. God, may the affections of our heart be towards you and not towards anything else that this world honestly can't offer us. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.